Let's talk about allusion and allegory. So, what is an allusion? An allusion is a reference, could be a really quick one, could be a somewhat hidden one, sure, but a reference to another work. The Bible is very common, Shakespeare is very common, things everybody knows, like fairy tales, are very common. Some people who know about their shared audience might reference something particular that works with children's books or some other aspect of shared pop culture. An allusion is a type of metaphor, but specifically, it's a comparison to Shakespeare, the Bible, whatever. His smile is like kryptonite to me. That one has been so common that it's really worked its way into our language, but sure. She felt like she had a golden ticket. That guy is young, scrappy, and hungry. Any Hamilton reference you see in the real world certainly counts as an allusion to Hamilton. I wish I could just click my heels. Some of these, again, have gotten so overused that we don't even really notice that they are references to literary works or something else. Doesn't have to be literature. It could be a movie, music, all kinds of things. If I'm not home by midnight, my car might turn into a pumpkin. She smiles like a Cheshire cat. His job is as tough as pulling a sword out of a stone. Is there an Einstein in your physics class? Referencing people, historical events, sure. My math teacher is he who must not be named. I want to sound like Queen Bee, quoting song lyrics. Today might be the Ides of March. Now might be a good time to sit in my thinking chair, when we've seen TV episodes so much that we just echo people's catchphrases. Let me put on my Cape Crusader costume and I'll be right with you. Does it count if we were on a break? I'm listening to The King. So yeah, shared culture that helps you make these references. And off we go. Classical myth. Classical myth means Greek and Roman. We've got loads of them that, again, have sunk into our culture so deeply we don't even notice that they are allusions. It's my Achilles heel? He shot a love arrow at me, or that image of a heart with an arrow through it? Carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, that is actually an allusion to Atlas, the Titan who was punished by having to carry the whole world on his shoulders forever. Ugh, it's like I'm pushing a boulder uphill every day. Sisyphus, where that was his punishment. The Greek gods were big on these terrible, miserable punishments that fit what you did, right? Ugh, it's hot as Hades. Ooh, she's like Venus in her shell. A Herculean effort. If it's been made into a word, it still counts. Ooh, don't do that. You'll be opening Pandora's box. It's Protean. References Proteus, the shape-changing god of, I believe, a river, a particular part of the water. He can't stop staring at himself like Narcissus, sure. And if you're thinking that you've seen Harry Potter names like Narcissa and Sirius and Minerva and so forth, yep, those would be allusions too. Bible. We've got a lot of Bible ones. Anything about the Garden of Eden, anything about the snake from the Garden of Eden, anything about the biblical flood, the apple, the cross, having the patience of Job or being punished like Job, Cain and Abel, betrayal, calling somebody Judas, calling somebody the Good Samaritan, making comments about David and Goliath. There's so many things that have been nicknamed Goliath, so many novels, so many concepts, to say nothing of Slingshot and so forth. So yeah, it's everywhere in our culture. And if you're analyzing poetry or literature or Hamilton or something, you can be on the lookout for these and point them out when you spot them. What are some types? Well, you could have a casual allusion that isn't part of the story. Somebody just used the word Herculean and moved on. It was just a little quick random thing. Likewise, could be a single allusion. Just one quick little reference to Merlin and Harry Potter, and they move on, and it wasn't relevant, and it didn't have anything to do with the story. It just referenced him. Although, of course, when we go back to that big question about and what effect did it have to put it in, we're doing a comparison. Merlin is like our characters. Our characters are like the big British mythological folkloric world. There are clear parallels between them. When you do an allusion to Greek mythology or to Judas the traitor or anything like that, you drag that whole story into your story and provide a comparison, emphasizing how they're similar. So sometimes it isn't a huge deal if it's just one quick little thing reminding us that this task is Herculean because it's so tough to do. Or sometimes we have a much bigger one, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. Self-reference. How many authors out there nod to their other works? How many Disney movies have a quick allusion to a different Disney movie? There's a lot of those, huh? How many authors like putting in, some people call it Easter eggs, to other movies, but it was an allusion way before it was an Easter egg. Marvel movies that reference other Marvel movies. Spider-Man movies that have a moment where we see a different Spider-Man or a nod to those. Of course, some could be a quick little thing and some could be a third of the movie, right? Corrective allusion. Sometimes something wants to mention the original source in order to do it better, in order to save it or redeem it. I read Margaret Atwood's The Penelopead, which was supposed to be like the Odyssey, but exploring how feminist his wife Penelope is and what she gets up to, as opposed to leaving the story just in the hands of the men. Frozen. It keeps saying you got engaged to a guy you just met, you can't do that. Why? Because it is trying to fix the stuff we saw happening in Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. There are so many Disney movies where they do get engaged to a guy they just met. So you can see Frozen trying to fix Disney by referencing these other stories and making it clear that we're doing something new now and we don't want to do it that way. Or when Moana is told, yeah, you're a Disney princess, you're just, more assertive and more capable and you're not falling in love, but yeah, you're still a Disney princess, you've got a talking animal and whatever, close enough. Not a talking animal, but sure. Apparent references. The author knows the source really well, and it is pretty clear what's going on. Even if it's just implied, we, the readers, can see what it is. Multiple allusions. Well, you could do several together. I was talking about you got engaged to a guy you just met. That actually, I can't tell which movie it is because that could be Snow White or Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty. We've got a few different choices, don't we? Or it could be all at once and thus be a multiple allusion or a conflation. If we say all Disney princesses do this or all fairy tales do that. If anybody saw the second Wreck-It Ralph movie, that one was famous for having every Disney princess show up. Isn't that just kind of bonkers? But yeah, that of course would be a multiple allusion, an allusion to every single Disney princess at once. Because they can. And of course, copyright, we're in this world of shared properties where Marvel could appear in Disney, Disney could appear in Marvel. The Simpsons did a Marvel short and a Star Wars short and a Disney Princess short and stuff like that, celebrating that Simpsons is under the same umbrella. So, yeah, these shared properties make it even easier. This is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Here is the house. It is green and white. It has a red door. It is very pretty here. Here's the family. Mother, father, Dick and Jane live in the green white house. They are very happy. See Jane. She has a red dress. She wants to play. Who will play with Jane? See the cat. It goes meow meow. Come and play. Come play with Jane. The kitten will not play. See mother. Mother is very nice. Mother, will you play with Jane? Mother laughs. Laugh, mother, laugh. See father. He is big and strong. Father, will you play with Jane? Father is smiling. Smile, father, smile. See the dog. Bow wow goes the dog. Do you want to play? Do you want to play with Jane? See the dog. Run, run. Dog, run, dog, run. Look, look, here comes a friend. The friend will play with Jane. They will play a good game. Play, Jane, play. What is that gibberish? Well, Toni Morrison figured that people reading her book would recognize it. Why? Because she is retelling, suggesting, alluding to, writing in the style of a Dick and Jane novel. Or not novel, picture book. Here's a page from one, and that's exactly what it sounds like. The Bluest Eye, in fact, is a short novel about what it feels like to grow up Black in America at a time when all the icons, all the Disney princesses, all of everybody's heroes were white and blonde, like Shirley Temple, and like these picture books. So she's writing in that style without punctuation because she's doing a kind of a stream of consciousness thing to drag this story into her book to use to contrast with what we could call real life, which doesn't feel like this at all. And she's pointing out how messed up it is that this is the standard, that this is how people assume real life is when it's completely fake. So there we go. So that would be a big fat illusion for the people who can recognize it. Romeo and Juliet references Cupid multiple times, references Queen Mab, the Queen of the Fairies. Why does he do this? Greek mythology was popular. Greek mythology was familiar to the audience. Greek mythology made Shakespeare sound all scholarly. It tied in with fate and the gods and playing with humans like toys, especially Cupid, who goes around just making everybody fall in love however he wants to, and the mischievousness of the fairies. So all these are echoing the problems that Romeo and Juliet are having. Lots of mythology in Shakespeare. I Have a Dream. 50 years ago, says MLK, he is referencing Abraham Lincoln's 7 years ago. So King is using this to reference Lincoln's speech, and he's standing in front of the statue of Abraham Lincoln, the Lincoln Memorial, and he's there to piggyback on Lincoln's speech. Lincoln was talking about we need to get out there and fight for freedom and finish up the Civil War. And King is out there saying Lincoln was great and promised freedom and equality. The founding fathers were great and they promised freedom and equality. I'm referencing their language, I'm quoting their words, but hello, they promised and they didn't give us everything they promised. We don't have real equality yet. So I'm referencing them in that corrective allusion to say, yeah, we need to fix what they started. We need to build on their stuff. They were on the right track, but they didn't get there, and we as a people need to finish what they wanted and get there for real. Sure. Moving on to the next one, allegory. An allegory is a book-length metaphor. If you write a whole book that kind of follows the story of Hercules, or Pride and Prejudice, or I'm doing Jane Austen's Emma, but I'm updating it to modern times, and I'm going to call it Clueless. Arguably, that is so close that it might even be an adaptation. But when you've got a book-length metaphor for something else, if you're doing kind of a Noah's Ark, but we're in space, or kind of an Adam and Eve story, but I'm doing some other things with it, and maybe it's two aliens, something like that, that is called an allegory. The characters and events are symbols that stand for ideas about life, that stand for mythology, that stand for a moment of history or a particular historical figure. There are a lot of stories out there that were written to mock or parody one historical figure, although often it's somebody who's a current politician at the time or something, and all the audience knows who we're talking about, and so forth. It's a symbolic meaning. It's not literal, just kind of everything ends up meaning something else. There are a lot of classics that follow this. East of Eden is an allegory of Cain and Abel. Animal Farm is an allegory of the Russian Revolution, like that, where you can draw these parallels between these characters and these other characters, and it really ends up being the same story, or symbolically at various levels doing the same thing. Or, of course, fixing, correcting, messing with, so forth. If I wrote about a character called Cindy, this might end up being a Cinderella allegory. Also might not, but I certainly could. So, other things I could do here include all my characters are symbols of something, like truth and hope and justice, as opposed to all my characters being people out of the Russian Revolution. Or I could do an extended metaphor, which would be the same metaphor over and over and over and over and over, where I just keep going back to that metaphor about everybody in my story is doing something Cinderella-like, or something. Or a whole speech where I keep saying we need to build on what the Founding Fathers created, let's say, so that everything gets this additional level of meaning. If it's a story that has a literal meaning and also a symbolic meaning, that would be an allegory. Could be an allegory for how people fall in love. Could be an allegory for humans' search for truth. Could be an allegory for any number of things. And it's fine if it also works just on a story level. In fact, that's preferred. But if you've got both, then it's an allegory. One evening, an old Cherokee told a grandson about a battle that goes on inside people, and he said there are two wolves inside us all. One is evil, and it's the force of anger and resentment. And the other wolf is good. It is joy and peace and kindness. And these two wolves are fighting inside me. And the grandson said, "Which wolf wins?" And the answer is, the one you feed. So that, of course, is an allegory for, are you, giving more energy, more time, more thought to your resentment and anger? Or are you giving more energy to being kind and thinking nice thoughts? And whichever one is the one that's going to win the battle for your soul. It's all one really, really big symbolic metaphor, so we call it allegory. Goldilocks and the Three Bears ends up being an entire allegory for kids that trespass, right? Aesop's fables, they all are very symbolic. They all have this single message about this is really a story about greed. This is really a story about laziness. The Ant and the Grasshopper, the story goes, the ant works all winter and the grasshopper just parties all. The ant works all summer gathering food. The grasshopper parties all summer, and then when winter comes, the ant has food and the grasshopper doesn't. This is a giant metaphor or allegory for being industrious versus lazy. The tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race, while the guy who sprints gets worn out and distracted. Sure. Some people say that the tortoise is like an older person and the hare is like a younger person. Sure. You can then push the symbolic meaning to mean other deeper things, yeah. Dr. Seuss. Some of these are allegories. Bartholomew and the Oobleck is a story about being too greedy. Yertle the Turtle is a story of being too ambitious, and some people would say it's a story mocking fascism at the time. The Sneetches that have, some of them have stars on their stomachs and some don't, and they all get prejudiced against each other, is obviously an allegory for prejudice, the way we do it in our world. So, yeah. The Lorax, environmentalism, failing to listen to the people close to the trees who can see all these terrible things happening. Yeah, lots of children's books are loaded with these deep, complex themes, and also this story about Oobleck or wacky creatures that works on a lighter level. Sure. Horton Hears a Who. Listen to the little people who need to be saved. Don't just ignore them. And they are, in fact, tiny people that live on a tiny little flower, but it works as a metaphor, an allegory for powerless people in our society. He's loaded. Wizard of Oz. Sure, it's a fantasy story. Dorothy gets blown into this magic world, makes friends with a scarecrow and a tin man and a lion, and they go down the yellow brick road, guided by the witch, and she's wearing silver slippers. It's silver in the book. And they go to see the Wizard of Oz, who is the only one who can give her a way home and give her friends brains and heart and courage. Something else that gets alluded to a lot in all kinds of things. Anyway, some people think that this was all a massive allusion for a political question of the day. Should we move from the gold standard to the silver standard? We're in the land of OZ, which is the sign for an ounce, of course. We've got silver slippers on the massive road of gold bricks, and she's descending down the road in the silver slippers. The Wicked Witches of the East and the West sound like the Eastern banks and the Western railroad industry, which are destroying life for the farmers. The Scarecrow is a farmer. The Tin Woodsman works in the canning factories and things like that. And people were saying that they've become these mechanized people who've lost all their hearts. Robots have become all kinds of allegories for all kinds of foreigners, people we don't trust, people who have had their, humanity removed from them, all kinds of things like that. Toto might be a teetotaler, a prohibitionist, and lots of people think the lion with no courage is William Jennings Bryan, the popular candidate for president from the Populist Party. And he started by supporting free silver, but then when economic conditions got better, he ran away from that. And lots of people saw a metaphor there. And we're going to the Emerald City, which will save us all. We're going to the capital where they have paper money, green paper money, and that will save us. Or will it? And they get there and they discover that the wizard is actually a humbug. He's been fooling everyone. He doesn't have any magic. And this, of course, works for the president of the US, who says that he's all powerful, but it's all an illusion. He's hiding it all. And Dorothy has to go destroy the Wicked Witch of the West, the old establishment money, which the wizard is afraid of. And she does this with water, because in fact, this was taking place during the Dust Bowl, a great drought, and water was the real power here. Is this what's going on? I don't know. There's a lot of evidence, as I just mentioned, but I don't think we have definitive facts on this. The author never said so. But that would be a really, really big illusion where I could sit and write an essay, as people have, about all the correspondences. And then, of course, I get into what does this mean? Baum was trying to satirize what was going on in the country, and he wanted it to change. And this is how he managed to speak out with this really popular children's fantasy story. And yet, hidden in it was what he wanted to happen and what he was upset was happening. So, those are all things you can do when you write allusions and allegories. Lion King. The Lion King is supposedly an original story, but in fact, it is very similar to Hamlet, where his wicked uncle killed his father, and he's banished from the kingdom, and he's got to return and confront his uncle and take his throne back. And again, when you consider how much Hamlet is struggling with the questions of what is my duty here, and life is so horrible that I don't even want to be a part of it, then the strategy of Hakuna Matata, just stop worrying about things, really does work as corrective. I mean, that is the advice Hamlet really could have used. Stop worrying, stop churning over everything in your headspace, and just relax, breathe out. Find some philosophy here, sure. Well, if we move on to our friend the Hamilton, we've got plenty of allegories and allusions here, don't we? Some famous ones. Lin-Manuel Miranda's life. Hamilton grows up in obscurity, and he is going to use his brains and his pen to write his way into fame and fortune. He is the smartest one in the room. He is a bit arrogant about being the smartest one in the room. He thinks everyone should listen to his words and do things the way he wants. Here is Miranda, who, yeah, his father came in as an immigrant and didn't speak English, and when Miranda chose to tell this story, he made the founding fathers, Black and Latino, to look like himself and his fellow actors from In the Heights, and said, this is the story of America then, told by America now. It looks like America now. So yeah, Miranda from a gifted school really saw himself in this. Macbeth is mentioned in Hamlet. He writes to Angelica and quotes from the play with tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and my colleagues think I'm Macbeth, and that ambition is going to bring me down, and I'm cursed, and this other guy is going to kill me in the end. All these references to Macbeth. And in fact, Macbeth is the story of somebody who got too ambitious and destroyed his own career. And oh, what do you know? Hamilton does that too with the Reynolds affair and with the death of his son. Religion. Hamilton and Burr reflect Jesus and Judas from Jesus Christ Superstar, or perhaps God and Lucifer. They start as allies, and then one turns toward evil and betrayal. And there are a few careful references to this dynamic, as well as big structural things like the concept where Burr is a very central character to Hamilton's story, just as Judas is in Jesus Christ Superstar. And that final betrayal and reflecting on being a villain forever. Modern politics. Lin-Manuel Miranda hosted SNL and said, let's talk about Hamilton, not about the presidential election. Yeah, Hamilton is about two famous New York politicians locked in a dirty, ugly, mudslinging political campaign, which, of course, was just like the 2016 election on so many levels. Sure. In Hamilton, we see the beginning of taking sides, red or blue, or us or them, with the two political parties. Not the ones we have today, but the division into political parties very much reflects where we are now. Miranda started writing this show in 2009 as the Tea Party movement was taking off, and he wrote this thinking, no, you guys can't have our country. We are part of this country. This country was created by immigrants. Don't kid yourselves. Immigrants have always been a major part of the story. People were also finding all kinds of parallels between this historic person or this current person and what they were seeing on the stage. The first Republican presidential debate for the 2016 presidential campaign aired during Hamilton's opening night. And as Trump was saying his anti-immigrant speeches, Miranda was continuing to say his pro-immigrant speeches in Hamilton, of course. It's also a famous moment where Mike Pence brought his family a week after the election to see Hamilton. And Aaron Burr's actor gave a speech that they'd prepared saying, "We are the diverse America. Please protect us and our family and work to help us all." Allusion. Little things, little references, not a big giant metaphor for Hamilton is Macbeth or Hamilton is Jesus and he's betrayed or he brings down his own society, but just little quick references. We don't see a lot of Shakespeare. We don't see a lot of literature. We get some myth, some Bible, some history, and also musicals, rap, hip-hop, pop culture. There's a lot of influence from the musicals Sweeney Todd, Jesus Christ Superstar, Evita, and Gypsy. The stories about people who went down in history as bad people. Concept albums that were largely music. And the anti-hero narrator telling the story of his life through the protagonist, also Wicked. Sweeney Todd, the hero is dead and everyone's setting up his story by introducing him. Hip hops are about writing your way out of your circumstances. We've got a bunch of rap lyrics. There's a reference to the $10 founding father from American Currency. What's Your Name is from Rap Battles. You can see there's lots and lots of stuff. What time is it? Showtime is something people hear on the subway when dancers arrive. We get Lancelot in there. I'm John Lawrence and the Place to Be is a traditional hip hop line or from Rap Battles. I'm a Diamond in the Rough is from Aladdin, if you notice the Disney one. You can see there are just so many little tiny references to this song, that song, the other song, if you know all these songs and can find them. Moses, Common Sense, Declaration of Independence. The Story of Tonight is very reminiscent of Drink With Me from Les Mis. The Schuyler Sisters sounds like Destiny's Child. Yeah. The King George songs are Beatles, so they're British invasion style. Ha, ha, ha. It just keeps going and going and going and going. I mean, too many to even read out, but of course, you can read them all. Some of these coming from rap are more risque than others. But clearly, Lin-Manuel Miranda is very well read. Here's Socrates throwing verbal rocks at these mediocrities. Fun with multisyllable rhyme. 19th century painting. There's just so many references. The John Trumbull painting of the Declaration of Independence, which also references the 1776 musical, by the way. Lots of musicals, lots of popular music, lots of the things Miranda is a fan of, which is a great way to go. So if you take a look at Hamilton, you can find so many. And of course, if you watch musicals, parodies, Disney's, they're all loaded with these too. There are so many allusions that you can find if you just take a quick look and watch for them. So as usual, give it a shot.